because this is a lady that I know. She used to be my supervisor with school, so I understand her mannerisms, how she speaks and what and what. But in terms of the story, at first, I think this is our third run or maybe fourth. We've been playing it over time. And with this particular run, at first what I used to do was to hold my emotions because I'm a psychologist, right? And I'm meant to be strong. But I think the story, it becomes difficult because I can't really remove myself from it. She is a psychologist, but also she's a human being. She's bound to feel. That's why she says, I cried. And I said to myself with this run, Thaba, I said, I'm just gonna let everything go. Because before one becomes a psychologist, when she comes in, she's stern, she's firm and whatnot. But as soon as he talks about meeting these women, everything just falls down. But because I also understand her mission into going into the cell, her mission is to understand why Eugene wanted to see that. And I kept on saying, it's important for me not to break down. There are points where I feel like, but I'm like, no, he cannot see me being weak. So yeah, I've had like those moments, but I think this run, Thaba, is totally different because I allowed myself to just go into it. I only had one scene when I was crying, and it's only because it's written like that in the script. Okay. Then she breaks down. That's the only time. But it's difficult. And actually my director said, you are there. You are feeling the impulses. So go in.
Okay, you've just mentioned AIDS. Just for my own curiosity, did her sister die of AIDS?
I don't know. When she was my supervisor, what I know for sure, she loved her sister. And I was telling Peter this morning that how I knew of her sister that passed away was because of her registration, Yakoloi. It was written Sesi. And then I asked him, why was it Sesi, this woman? Sesi Western Cape. And he says, no, it was her sister that passed away. But in terms of whether it was AIDS, I don't know, but I believe so because this book, the play is based on the book that she wrote. So I don't think, I can't confirm it, but I have a strong suspicion that she was killed with AIDS.
Okay. I have one for you as well, Peter. Firstly, I need to applaud your bravery to portray a character such as Eugene de Kock. I mean, I hope
it's such a relevant question because it's a discussion that we had often. Because I don't buy it. I don't buy into Eugene's arguments.
Okay.
Especially in view of what happened, especially in view of the fact that he was released, especially in view of little things like he was given quite a big settlement when he was finally released. He got a lot of money. We don't know where he is. He's in witness protection at the moment, which means the chances are he's living a very good life.
In Libya.
Probably. But he's in witness protection. You know, people like that, like the guy who killed Chris Harning. Those people are in danger. They can't just be released into society because, you know, they're not going to survive, let's be honest. So this guy's living a good life, so I don't think he deserves that, personally.
Okay.
But I read a book by J.M. Coetzee and a psychiatrist, which is called The Good Story, which is about the narrative that we all have in our own heads. Which isn't the story that you tell other people about yourself. It's a story that you tell yourself, bearing in mind that pedophiles and murderers also have a story in their minds that they tell themselves, that they wake up with in the morning, telling themselves. And you've got to believe that story, for better or worse. Otherwise, how do you justify anything? How do you justify any behavior? So, to answer your question, I approached Eugene like that. This is Eugene's story. Eugene believes in his own narrative, in his own mind, that this is justification for whatever happened. And as you so correctly point out, and that's why I keep saying to Karabir, isn't it interesting how he keeps saying, but the others, but the scapegoat, yeah, sure, I agree with that. But does that excuse it? So even if you were a scapegoat, even if there were others, even if you were just in a group, even if you were a cog in a machine or whatever, you were part of that machine, does that excuse you? And then I just want to get back to what I said yesterday to the group who asked. You know, we can talk about this play as having a central theme of forgiveness, for example, which is true. some party has to forgive. If we put it into the context of today, what you said, we're not over it. We're very far from over it. There's lots of issues in this country that we've still got to bridge. The TRC certainly wasn't the beginning and the end of it. We're hoping that this will reopen the discussion so that we can go there. But if you take it in the context of, let's say, internationally, Israel and Palestine and what's happening in Gaza, how is that situation going to resolve itself? Somebody is going to have to forgive somebody. At some point, we're going to have to get to a point where somebody's going to have to say, let's stop this madness. Let's put it behind us, let's forgive, and let's get over it, and let's start building, which is what the TRC tried to do. But I want to throw it back to you guys. Go and think for yourselves. That's easy to say. Easy to talk about forgiveness. Easy to say that forgiveness and reconciliation and what the TRC did is probably the only means to true resolution. But the question that it also asks is, if it was you, your mother, your father, your brother, forget about being killed by somebody, let's just say being harmed. Your sister or a family member, somebody close to you was harmed. Would you forgive? Think about it.
Thank you.
But thanks for that. Those are such brilliant questions. Thank you.
Angry, and 10 minutes towards the end we talk about forgiveness, and I'm wondering, what is the point of all this? If I'm sitting here and I'm traumatized and I'm angry, what is the point? And I'm asking this question because last year I saw a couple of plays in SA at the Grahamstown Festival, and everybody's just re-traumatizing themselves, and I feel like, what is the point of this re-traumatization? Because I'm sitting here, I'm not South African, and I feel traumatized. And I'm just wondering what everybody in here feels like when they're listening to this, So that's I guess that's a brilliance with which you carried the story. And another thing which makes me really, really angry, now this I guess is my own politics. I'm listening to Pumla, who's gone through so many seasons listening to this guy talking about killing people and causing all these atrocities, and yet she can't forgive black men for being unfaithful or whatever. It's like, what is the point? Why so much anger towards black men when here you're sitting next to a whole murderer? What is the point?
Specializes in traumatic memory and transgenerational trauma. That's his speciality. That's why she wrote this play. I think she realized that, yes, we all rushed into the process of democracy, but the importance of having these sort of conversations. She's quite aware that trauma doesn't leave you behind. It goes with you. But what is important is for us to keep on talking about the story. Personally, besides the fact that I know Prof, what attracted me to this story, it was the kind of issues that it's raising. You have young people who are not even part of the apartheid system. They are so angry. They have so much. South Africans are walking around with gaping wounds. That's who we are. We saw 2 years ago the student from Stellenbosch urinating on the. That's who we are. But we cannot say, okay, let's go back to the table and talk about these issues. It's important for me as a South African to bring these issues back and say, let's when we talk about forgiveness, what are we actually saying? That's why this play becomes important to me. It's not even an issue. Whether we talk about the trauma that we experienced or we don't, we are traumatized people. You would find grade 12 learners who says, I hate white men. And you're like, but why? No, they killed my grand, but they don't have the full story. People know of Eugene. When we did the show at Freyfields, they knew of Eugene, and white people, some of them walked out because they cannot confront the truth of what Eugene did. Now, are we always going to keep on running? No, we can't. We need to sit down and lay down these issues. Because what's going to happen is that 20 years from now, our kids will still be talking apartheid. That's number one. I think I get what you say about the black man and her not. I think because she lost somebody that was so dear to her. That was so dear to her sister, because of the man. Professor, I think there were stories that she doesn't date men anymore. She is attracted to the same sex and whatnot. I think she is also, as an individual, she's suffering from her own things. I think really her anger towards the black man, because he comes, he's a chauvinist. That's the other thing about Eugene. He's a chauvinist that doesn't care. Everything is about white and man. He comes and he says, I feel sorry for the man. And Puna says, actually, that's not the full story. Let me give you the full story. It's the woman that stayed. I know it. I experienced it. My sister died. She could have left, but she chose to stay. And that's how it is. And I think it's also such a beautiful play, especially now that we're celebrating the 30 years. We get to reflect. I mean, in 2001, we're talking 10% of women who were HIV positive. So much has happened. Where are we now as a country? So that's why this play becomes so important. Yes, skin meat, I agree with you. It really traumatizes us. After playing, we feel so tired, guys, because the play requires us to go into those spaces, emotion. It's a tiring piece, but you come back and you say, okay, but this is where I am. Things are different, you know. It helps with the healing.
And just to add on to that, something that I want to throw back to you guys to think about as well is, in terms of reconciliation, there's this concept of truth, which I'm picking up from you, what you said. You've got to buy into truth. You know, it's like what you were saying about Eugene constantly saying, but, you know, I always have this thing when people say, you know, I don't want to gossip, but, you know, I'm not a racist, but, you know, I'm not a defensive driver, but, or whatever, you know. But the moment you say that, it's like almost you're setting yourself up as, and then it's a question of, what do people buy into? Do you buy into the story? Do you buy into this reconciliation? Remember, Eugene is just representative of one case. There were many such cases. The TRC was a nationwide thing that traveled around the country, that saw literally hundreds, if not thousands of people give testimony, and perpetrators. I mean, you know, this Eugene is just one example. Okay, it's a fairly extreme example, but one example. So the thing that I want you guys to think about and go back in terms of getting over this anger, which is such a brilliant testimony to the fact that actually it hasn't gone away. It's still there. It can resurface. It just requires a little bit of scratching, and there it is. So, you know, how much did you buy into? How much did you believe? How much do you believe in this fantastic promise of this nation that is reconciled and whatever? Do you believe it? Do you buy into it?
I mean, also, it helps us understand. I mean, we have a story of Chris Hani. Please, by the show of hands, the learners, who knows Chris Hani?
Chris Hani. Nobody.
Only one. I see one hand.
Okay. So we have that story of Chris Hani, who was killed outside his house. Right? And for so many years, the perpetrator has been arrested. Not so long ago, I think it was last year, he was released because he qualified for parole.
Yeah.
But now we see his wife. She cannot forgive this man. She's struggling to forgive this. It's been years since Chris Hani died. But the wife still says, I cannot forgive him. And just for one thing, because this man is not showing remorse. So this play teaches us about that. When somebody comes and says, are you really sorry? Do you acknowledge what you did? And that's what Omempo says all the time. This man does not show remorse. That's why the anger comes. Because somehow maybe you feel like in a space where you are with white people, they make you feel like you're black. So they don't show remorse of what happened. We cannot move forward if we can't sit and talk about these things and show remorse.
And we have to be real and honest, like you were.
Yes.
Saying
Honest,
that's an honest. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a fantastic response.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about that.
Yeah.
That's exactly the right response. Because that anger is real. It's real.
Are there any other questions? No. Okay, ma'am.
Please stand up. In the book, if you ever get the time, please get the book. In the book, she gives a beautiful description of the day that she decided to go see Eugene. It's so descriptive, it's so vivid. She was scared, but because she is a lecturer of forgiveness and reconciliation, she wanted to understand why Eugene said, after the testimony, I want to see she was curious. So because of also what the field that she's in, she's a psychologist. Her job is to understand human behavior. So she couldn't bring her fear because she knew, with fear, I think also that's another thing about this play that it teaches us. We always say that fear stops you from actually living your life. She was scared, but she decided to go. And because she went, she was able to engage and get a different story. And now we are sitting here, we get to understand Eugene's story. Shout. She bought into it because she says, I believe you are sorry for what you did. But then the play comes again. It shows us that also forgiveness is not such an easy thing. Again, she says, I believe you are sorry for what you did, so you should be released. That's what she says. But then he comes then and says, did I ever kill anyone in your family? And what am I? Would you forgive me? He asks me that question. Would you forgive me if I killed anyone? Then my response is, I don't know. So this concept of forgiveness, it's not as easy as we always say it is. It's much deeper than that. And it shows us, the play really shows us that we have to be honest with ourselves. In the 1 minute she says, no, I believe you are sorry. You should be released. By virtue of her saying that, it means that Ishakukawe. But now, 2 seconds later she comes and says, actually I don't know, I am sorry. Yeah.
Do you want Pumla to answer? Yeah, well, it's exactly that. You know, the play is based on reconciliation. But, you know, I think what our hope is forthcoming out of this discussion and out of the play is the complexity of it. So, you know, it is based on in very broad terms on reconciling, because I think that's what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was about. It was about reconciliating what you calling black and white. But on a far deeper level than that, it wasn't just about those almost kind of stereotypical obvious reconciliations. There were so many little things that were happening underneath that sort of informed the social fiber and structure of our society. Things that we've touched on now, like honesty, anger, forgiveness, our capacity as human beings to put ourselves into other people's positions and to see other people's points of view, for example, our tolerance, you know, our our compassion.
He says it.
You know, Pumla, that was my trigger hand that you touched.
I was being sucked into the world of ugly, cruel, drunken white men. Men who got their kicks by boasting about their crimes against black people.
That's not what I meant.
Were you blaming the hand?
The hand?
The trigger hand, the killing hand. Were you saying that the hand was guilty and not you?
Oh, is that psychology?
Yes. It is well known to psychologists.
Well, then it's definitely rubbish.
Was it because you felt that being confronted by a black woman made you feel like a weakling?
But I don't think of you as a black woman.
No? So look at it this way. 10 years ago, you had the power of life over people like me. Were you comforting yourself by remembering that?
Why would I try to remember that? I'm trying to forget it.
So what were you saying?
Pumla, you are looking for simple answers. But there aren't any simple answers. It was a crazy situation all those years.